The sound of an engine revving is more than just mechanical noise. It's the heartbeat of human ambition, the echo of a dream that refuses to be silenced. And few names carry that echo across the globe quite like Toyota. Today, Toyota is everywhere, from the bustling freeways of Los Angeles to the rural highways of Texas to the neon-lit streets of Tokyo. It's a name synonymous with reliability, efficiency, and innovation. But behind the polished steel and global dominance lies a story that is far more dramatic than most realize. Because Toyota wasn't born a car company at all, its roots trace back not to engines and rubber, but to the steady rhythm of weaving looms. At the turn of the 20th century, Japan was still catching up with the industrial powers of the West. Kiichiro Toyoda, a humble yet brilliant inventor, devoted his life to building advanced textile machines that would help modernize his nation. His son, Kiichiro, grew up in that world of gears, motion, and invention. But while his father dreamed of perfecting the loom, Kiichiro was captivated by something else entirely: the automobile. In the early 1900s, cars were rare in Japan. Exotic machines from foreign lands, symbols of progress but out of reach for ordinary people. To most, the idea of Japan building its own cars seemed impossible, even laughable. Yet Kiichiro Toyoda carried within him a bold and dangerous vision, that Japan could create cars of its own, cars that could compete with, and perhaps even surpass, the giants of America and Europe. What followed was a journey filled with failure, sacrifice, and resilience. From the very first Toyota car, the modest 1936 AA, to the birth of Toyota Motor Company itself in 1937, every step was a battle against doubt, scarcity, and circumstance. During World War II, Toyota was nearly crushed, reduced to building military trucks and teetering on the edge of extinction. In the bleak post-war years, it faced bankruptcy, worker strikes, and tragedy that almost ended the dream forever. But out of these ashes came rebirth. In the 1960s, Toyota unveiled a car that would forever change the landscape of motoring: the Corolla. Compact, efficient, and affordable, it arrived at the perfect moment, just as the world was demanding something new. In America, it found fertile ground, and soon, the Corolla wasn't just another car. It became the car of the people. Today, more than 50 million have been sold, making it the best-selling car in human history. Yet Toyota's story isn't just one of practicality, it's also a story of passion. In the 1990s, the company unleashed a machine that would burn its name into the imagination of enthusiasts everywhere: the Toyota Supra. With its legendary 2JZ engine and unmistakable silhouette, the Supra wasn't just a car, it was a cultural phenomenon. From racetracks to video games, from Tokyo streets to Hollywood blockbusters like The Fast and the Furious, the Supra cemented Toyota's place not just in garages, but in hearts. And so, Toyota stands today as more than just a company. It is a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that innovation is born not from comfort, but from struggle. From looms to legends, from bankruptcy to billions, the story of Toyota is the story of a dreamer who refused to accept limits. This is not just the history of a car company. This is the story of how one man's vision helped reshape global transportation, challenged the titans of the industry, and gave the world two icons: the Corolla, the car that everyone drives, and the Supra, the car that everyone desires. This is the history of Toyota. The story of Toyota begins not with cars, but with threads. At the dawn of the 20th century, Japan was in the throes of transformation. The nation, once isolated for centuries, was rapidly modernizing, absorbing Western ideas of industry and technology while still clinging tightly to tradition. Factories buzzed with the promise of industrial growth, and in this moment of change stood Kiichiro Toyoda, a man hailed as the king of Japanese inventors. Kiichiro was not a wealthy aristocrat, nor a man with access to vast resources. He was the son of a carpenter, born in 1867 in the small farming village of Yamaguchi. His obsession was simple, yet powerful: to improve the lives of ordinary Japanese workers through invention. He focused on textiles, the backbone of Japan's economy at the time. In 1896, he created Japan's first automatic loom, a breakthrough that revolutionized the textile industry and allowed Japan to compete with the West. His looms became so advanced that even the British, the masters of textile machinery, would later purchase his patents. Into this world of gears, pulleys, and whirring machines was born his son, Kiichiro Toyoda, in 1894. Kiichiro's childhood was defined by the rhythm of invention. He grew up watching his father tirelessly refine designs, testing ideas late into the night, never satisfied with good enough. The Toyota household was not one of luxury, but of discipline, ingenuity, and restless pursuit of improvement, values that would later define Toyota Motor Company itself. But while Sakichi's dreams were bound to looms, Kiichiro's imagination was captivated by something else: the automobile. As a boy, he saw his first car on the streets of Japan, a rare sight in the early 1900s. To most Japanese, the machine was a foreign curiosity, noisy and impractical. To young Kiichiro, it was a revelation. He was mesmerized by its motion, its power, and the idea that a machine could carry people swiftly over long distances without horses or rails. In that moment, a seed was planted. As he grew older, Kiichiro pursued studies in mechanical engineering at the University of Tokyo, graduating in 1920. Unlike many of his peers who sought comfortable careers in government or established industries, Kiichiro was driven by curiosity. He wanted to understand how machines worked, how systems could be made more efficient, how motion could be harnessed and perfected. His education gave him the technical grounding, but it was his father's spirit of relentless innovation that gave him the courage to dream. In the 1920s, Kiichiro embarked on study tours abroad, visiting Europe and the United States. These journeys would change him forever. In America, he stood inside the sprawling factories of Ford Motor Company, watching the assembly line in action. The sight was staggering, cars moving step by step down a line, each worker adding a single part, transforming raw steel into a finished automobile in record time. For Kiichiro, it was a glimpse into the future. But it wasn't just the technology that impressed him. It was the scale. The United States was producing millions of cars, filling highways with Fords, Chevrolets, and Dodges, while in Japan, the number of automobiles barely registered in the thousands. His homeland was far behind, its roads empty, its economy dependent on foreign imports. If Japan was to truly modernize, it needed not just textile machines, but cars. And if Japan was ever to stand proudly alongside America and Europe, it would need to build its own automobiles, designed and produced by Japanese hands. Still, the idea seemed nearly impossible. At the time, Japan's government and business leaders believed building cars was a fool's errand. Imported vehicles dominated the market, and the resources required for car production were immense. Factories, supply chains, steel, engines, testing, all of it required money and experience Japan simply didn't have. Even Sakichi Toyoda, though supportive of his son's ambitions, cautioned him about the risks. The Toyota family business was thriving in textiles. Why risk everything on a dream as uncertain as automobiles? But Kiichiro's vision was unshakable. He believed that cars were not just machines, but symbols of progress and independence. He saw them as tools that could transform societies, connect people, and empower nations. And deep within him was the belief that Japan deserved to stand on equal footing with the great powers of the world. In 1929, a pivotal moment arrived. With this financial lifeline, Kiichiro began to experiment. He imported vehicles, dismantled them, studied their engines and frames, and began to piece together his vision of a Japanese car. In his modest workshops, surrounded by skeptical workers and engineers, he worked tirelessly. Progress was slow and setbacks were constant. But Kiichiro was undeterred. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. He knew that the world would doubt Japan's ability to produce a car worthy of international roads, and he knew that even within his own company there were those who questioned the wisdom of his obsession. Yet he pressed forward, driven by something greater than profit, a belief that Japan's future demanded this leap. What Kiichiro Toyoda was about to attempt would be nothing short of revolutionary. The creation of Japan's very first passenger car, designed not in Detroit or Stuttgart, but in the heart of a nation still rebuilding itself. It would test his resilience, his ingenuity, and his courage. And it would set into motion a story that would echo across the decades, shaping the lives of millions. The loom was his father's legacy. The automobile would be his. The late 1920s and early 1930s were a time of global uncertainty. The Great Depression had shaken economies around the world, and in Japan, industrial ambitions were often stifled by scarce resources and a cautious business culture. Against this backdrop, Kiichiro Toyoda set out on a path that few believed was possible, building Japan's first true automobile. At the start, his vision was not met with applause. Many within the Toyota family business, then a respected textile machinery empire, viewed cars as a dangerous distraction. Automobiles were expensive to design, difficult to manufacture, and nearly impossible to sell in volume in a nation where the roads themselves were rudimentary. Skeptics argued that imported vehicles from Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, all of which already operated assembly plants in Japan, had already secured dominance. Why pour scarce resources into a hopeless competition? But Kiichiro was relentless. He believed Japan could not rely on foreign imports forever. He also knew that creating an automobile industry would mean much more than producing cars. It would foster steel production, rubber, glass, electronics, and skilled labor, all of which would help Japan modernize. His ambition was not just personal, but national. Using funds from his father's loom patent sale, Kiichiro established a small automotive research department within Toyota Automatic Loom Works in 1930. At first, progress was painfully slow. His team of engineers had little to no experience with engines or chassis design. They began by disassembling American and European cars piece by piece, sketching components, taking measurements, and studying their construction. Cars such as the Chevrolet and Ford sedans became their textbooks. It was a humbling process. The engineers quickly realized that replicating these machines was far harder than they expected. Metallurgy in Japan was not yet advanced enough to produce high-quality engine parts. Precision machining tools were scarce, and the company often had to improvise with equipment designed for textile machinery rather than heavy automotive components. Early engines sputtered, seized, or overheated. Gearboxes cracked under load. Even simple parts like bearings were prone to failure. For Kiichiro, these failures were not signs to retreat, but lessons to be absorbed. He worked alongside his engineers, encouraging them to persist and reminding them that every broken engine was a step closer to success. His leadership style was not one of harsh commands, but of shared struggle. He was willing to endure embarrassment, frustration, and even ridicule if it meant progress. By 1933, the project began to take clearer shape. That year, Toyota Automatic Loom Works officially created an automobile division under Kiichiro's direction. It was still modest, a small team of passionate but undertrained engineers working with limited resources. Yet this formal recognition marked the first official step in Toyota's journey toward becoming a car company. The division's earliest prototypes were crude, often direct copies of American designs. One of the first engines they developed was a 3.4-liter inline-six called the Type A, heavily inspired by a Chevrolet power plant. Critics would later accuse Toyota of copying, but in truth, reverse engineering was the only way forward for a nation that had no prior experience in automobile manufacturing. And while the foundation was borrowed, Kiichiro and his engineers gradually introduced refinements, small but meaningful improvements in fuel efficiency, durability, and adaptability to Japan's challenging roads. These years were defined by trial and error. The engineers worked in workshops that often lacked proper equipment. They fabricated parts by hand, tested them, and then returned to the drawing board when they failed. Many of the prototypes never made it out of the factory gates. Each setback drained the company's limited funds and patience. Within the Toyota family, arguments grew tense. Should they continue risking everything on Kiichiro's dream or retreat to the safety of textile machines where profits were reliable? Still, Kiichiro pressed on. His determination was fueled not only by personal ambition but by national pride. Japan was at a crossroads in the early 1930s, a rising power in Asia but still dependent on Western technology. Automobiles were more than consumer products. They were symbols of independence and progress. If Japan could master automobile production, it could stand as an equal among the great industrial powers. The breakthroughs came slowly. By 1934, the team had completed a functioning prototype engine that was reliable enough for testing. The following year, they built their first prototype passenger car, which bore striking resemblance to American models of the era. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was theirs. For the first time, Japanese engineers had built a car not merely assembled from imported kits, but created within Japan's own workshops. Even so, challenges remained daunting. The government was skeptical, consumers were cautious, and competitors, especially American firms, had far more experience and resources. Every new development seemed to bring Toyota to the edge of financial strain. Kiichiro faced constant pressure from within the family business, where some directors believed the car division was a financial black hole. The emotional toll was heavy. Letters from the era describe Kiichiro as weary yet unyielding, often working late into the night, personally reviewing design drafts and performance data. He poured himself into the project with an intensity that sometimes alienated even close colleagues. But his conviction never wavered. He truly believed that if Japan could produce its own cars, it would transform the nation's future. And so, in the mid-1930s, the Toyota automobile project stood at a critical juncture. The prototypes existed, the engines ran, and the dream had survived its first bruising encounters with reality. Yet Toyota was not yet a car company, not officially. The journey to turn these fragile beginnings into a legitimate enterprise was only just beginning. What lay ahead would test Kiichiro Toyoda even more severely. The creation of his company's very first production car, one that could prove Toyota's worth not just to his family, but to the entire nation. By 1934, Kiichiro Toyoda and his small team had proven one thing. They could build a functioning automobile. What remained uncertain was whether they could build a car that ordinary people would buy, one that could stand against the American giants already entrenched in Japan. That challenge would culminate in the creation of the Toyota AA, the company's first production passenger car. The journey to the AA began with the development of the Type A engine. This was Toyota's first complete automobile engine, a 3.4-liter inline-six that produced around 62 horsepower. It was modeled closely on a Chevrolet engine of the era, but with refinements made by Toyota engineers to suit Japanese conditions. Roads in Japan were narrower, rougher, and often unpaved. Engines had to be resilient and forgiving, not just powerful. The Type A wasn't revolutionary, but it was reliable, and reliability would become Toyota's calling card for decades to come. With the engine in hand, Kiichiro turned his attention to building a full passenger car. The design team studied American sedans like the Chrysler Airflow, drawing inspiration from their streamlined bodies and roomy interiors. Japan, however, lacked the industrial base to create the advanced steel pressings and components available to American factories. This forced Toyota engineers to rely on smaller-scale methods, hand-finishing many components, and innovating in places where resources fell short. In 1935, the first prototypes were completed, the A1 passenger cars. These were not production-ready, but they marked a milestone, the first Japanese-designed sedans built by Japanese engineers with Japanese parts. Kiichiro personally drove one of these early prototypes around Nagoya, testing its performance on rough roads and proving to doubters that his dream was not just fantasy. Encouraged, Toyota prepared for mass production. In 1936, the company officially launched its first passenger car for the public, the Toyota AA. The Toyota AA, specs and style. The AA was a four-door sedan powered by the 3.4-liter Type A engine. It featured a streamlined body that echoed the Chrysler Airflow, though with simpler, more practical lines. The interior was designed for comfort, with seating for up to 6 passengers. While its 62 horsepower output was modest by American standards, it was more than adequate for Japanese roads of the time. The car had a 3-speed manual transmission, rear-wheel drive, and a top speed of around 70 miles per hour. It wasn't a sports car and it wasn't luxurious, but it was practical, durable, and crucially, it was Japanese-made. Priced competitively against imported cars, it gave Japanese consumers an option they had never truly had before. In its first year, Toyota produced just 1,404 units. By global standards, this was insignificant. But for Japan, it was groundbreaking. For the first time, a domestic manufacturer had created a car from the ground up, ready for public roads. The struggles behind the success. The AA's production was anything but smooth. Toyota's workshops were still under-equipped compared to Western factories. Engineers often had to improvise solutions with limited machinery. Steel quality was inconsistent, and Toyota had to develop relationships with domestic suppliers to secure the raw materials needed. Worse still, Toyota faced enormous skepticism from government officials and financial institutions. Automobiles were still seen as luxuries in 1930s Japan, not essential products. The government initially favored imported vehicles, particularly from Ford and GM, who already had established assembly plants in Japan and dominated the market. For every Toyota AA sold, dozens of American cars rolled onto Japanese roads. And yet Toyota persisted. The AA wasn't just a car, it was a statement. It symbolized Japan's ability to produce modern technology independently, without relying on imports. For Kiichiro, each car that left the factory represented not just a product, but a piece of national pride. The first truck, Toyota G1. Alongside the AA, Toyota also began producing commercial trucks, starting with the Toyota G1 in 1935. Trucks were considered more practical and vital for Japan's economy, and they quickly gained government interest. While the AA struggled to compete with imported sedans, the G1 truck gave Toyota a foothold in the market. This diversification into both passenger cars and commercial vehicles would prove critical for Toyota's survival in the years to come. Building momentum. By 1936, the success of the AA and G1 prototypes had convinced the Toyota family and investors that the automobile venture was viable. That same year, Toyota entered its cars into government-sponsored competitions, pitting them against foreign models. While Toyota's vehicles weren't always the fastest or most refined, they impressed judges with their durability and adaptability to Japan's roads. The Japanese government, increasingly focused on strengthening domestic industry in the lead-up to war, began to see value in supporting Toyota. This shift would soon lead to greater backing and opportunities for the young company. More than just a machine for Kiichiro, the AA represented more than technical progress. It was the embodiment of his belief that Japan could stand alongside the world's great industrial powers. He had taken his father's legacy, the loom, and extended it into a realm his father could never have imagined. Where Kiichiro Toyoda had woven threads of fabric, Kiichiro was weaving the fabric of a new industry. The AA was far from perfect. It was derivative in design, limited in production, and unremarkable by global standards. But in the context of 1930s Japan, it was revolutionary. It was proof of concept. It was the beginning of Toyota as an automaker, the turning point. By the end of 1936, Toyota had done what no Japanese company had achieved before, produced a passenger car of its own design, powered by its own engine, sold to the Japanese public. The accomplishment gave Kiichiro the credibility he desperately needed. Investors took notice, government officials began to listen, and the dream of a dedicated automobile company no longer seemed impossible. But this milestone was only the beginning. Producing a single car model in small numbers was one thing. Building an entire company capable of sustaining mass production was another. To transform Toyota from a textile offshoot into a legitimate car manufacturer would require bold new steps, immense resources, and even greater risks. In 1937, Kiichiro would take that leap, establishing Toyota Motor Company as a standalone entity. The world of looms was left behind. The world of automobiles lay ahead. The year was 1937, and the world was inching closer to conflict. In Japan, political tensions were escalating. Militarism was on the rise, and the nation's economy was being reshaped to serve war preparations. Yet in the midst of this turbulence, Kiichiro Toyoda was preparing to take the most decisive step of his life. For years, automobiles had been a side project under Toyota Automatic Loom Works. But the success of the Toyota AA sedan and G1 truck convinced Kiichiro that cars deserved their own company. If Toyota was to be taken seriously as an automaker, it needed independence, structure, and a dedicated workforce. On August 28, 1937, the dream became reality. Toyota Motor Company Limited was officially founded, the birth of a company. The name itself marked a subtle but symbolic change. Until then, the family name had been spelled Toyoda, but Kiichiro and his advisors decided on Toyota. The reasons were practical and cultural. Toyota was easier to pronounce, sounded modern, and when written in Japanese katakana, it required 8 strokes, a number associated with good fortune. It was a new name for a new era. At the helm stood Kiichiro Toyoda, visionary engineer and reluctant businessman. He was not the most charismatic leader, nor the most ruthless. What he lacked in showmanship he made up for in determination and belief. He surrounded himself with engineers who shared his obsession with learning, adapting, and improving. They were not building just cars, they were building an industry. The first factory, with the company now official, Toyota needed a home. In Koromo, a small rural town in Aichi Prefecture, construction began on Toyota's first dedicated automobile factory. It was a modest facility compared to the sprawling plants of Detroit, but for Japan, it was revolutionary. Rows of workshops housed stamping machines, welding stations, and assembly areas. Workers, many of them young and inexperienced, trained tirelessly to master the unfamiliar processes of automobile production. Inside, the philosophy that would later define Toyota was already taking root. Kiichiro emphasized efficiency and adaptability. Because resources were scarce, waste had to be minimized. Every bolt, every sheet of steel, every drop of fuel mattered. These ideas were not yet formalized into the legendary Toyota production system, but their seeds were being planted in the routines of the 1930s factory floor. Government-influenced Toyota's timing was both fortunate and precarious. In 1936, Japan's government had passed the Automobile Manufacturing Industries Act, designed to encourage domestic automakers and reduce reliance on foreign imports. For Toyota, this was a lifeline. The act limited foreign car companies like Ford and GM, creating space for Japanese firms to grow. Toyota, with its AA sedan and G1 truck, was perfectly positioned to take advantage. At the same time, the government's interest was not purely commercial. Japan was preparing for war, and vehicles were seen as vital to the military. This meant Toyota received support, but also pressure. Trucks, not passenger cars, became the priority. The government needed reliable, rugged vehicles for the army, and Toyota was expected to deliver. Early workforce challenges. Life inside the new Toyota Motor Company was far from glamorous. The workforce was inexperienced, tools were often inadequate, and materials were limited. Mistakes were frequent, and production was slow. Yet there was a sense of purpose. Workers understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, the birth of Japan's automobile industry. Kiichiro, unlike many industrial leaders of his time, was known to walk the factory floor, engaging directly with workers. He believed in teaching through example and encouraged innovation at every level. If a worker found a way to improve a process, Kiichiro wanted to hear it. These attitudes, rare for the era, would later form the backbone of Toyota's corporate culture. Expanding the lineup. By the late 1930s, Toyota had expanded beyond the AA sedan. New models were developed, including the Toyota AB, a convertible version of the AA, and the GA truck, designed specifically for commercial and military use. The trucks quickly gained traction, fulfilling contracts for the Japanese government. Passenger cars, however, remained a luxury item, accessible only to a small fraction of Japan's population. Still, Kiichiro insisted on pushing both fronts. He believed trucks would sustain Toyota in the short term, but passenger cars would define the company's future. He was already thinking ahead, envisioning a post-war Japan where cars would be a part of everyday life. Financial struggles. Despite government support, Toyota's finances were fragile. Building automobiles required vast sums of money, far more than the textile machinery business had ever demanded. Factories had to be maintained, workers paid, suppliers secured. Toyota was constantly balancing on the edge of debt. Every small delay, every defective part, every downturn in the economy threatened the company's survival. Some within the Toyota family questioned whether Kiichiro had gone too far. The automobile business seemed bottomless in its appetite for capital, and returns were slow to materialize. But Kiichiro's conviction carried the day. For him, there was no turning back. The road ahead. By the eve of World War II, Toyota Motor Company had achieved what many thought impossible. It had gone from a side project under a loom company to a legitimate automaker with its own factory, workforce, and growing lineup of vehicles. Yet the company was still fragile, still vulnerable. The looming war would soon put Toyota to the test. Instead of producing sleek sedans for families, the company would be ordered to churn out military trucks, stripped down and rugged, for use on the battlefield. The dream of passenger cars would be put on hold. Kiichiro's vision of mobility for the masses would have to wait. But even in those dark years, the foundation had been laid. Toyota Motor Company existed. The seed had been planted. The loom maker's son had done what no one thought possible. He had created Japan's first true automobile company. What lay ahead was a storm that would nearly destroy it. The year was 1939, and the winds of war swept across the globe. Japan had already invaded China, and tensions with the West were rising rapidly. For Kiichiro Toyoda and his fledgling Toyota Motor Company, the timing could not have been worse. The dream of passenger cars, sleek sedans rolling off the assembly line, families driving through city streets, was abruptly shattered. Instead, Toyota was conscripted into service for the Japanese war machine. Trucks, not cars, became the lifeblood of the factory. The company's production lines were ordered to build military transport vehicles, stripped down and rugged, designed not for comfort but survival. The war years. During World War II, Toyota's focus narrowed to meet military demand. The factory in Corolla was tasked with producing the KC truck, a no-frills vehicle built for wartime logistics. These trucks often lacked even the most basic amenities: no doors, no lights, and sometimes no brakes. Anything deemed non-essential was stripped away to save precious steel and rubber. The company's engineers, once passionate about designing new cars, now spent their days trying to make the simplest vehicles function under extreme shortages. Creativity turned into survival engineering. Substitutes had to be found for steel, copper, and rubber, leading to innovations born not of choice, but necessity. For Kiichiro, this was a bitter pill to swallow. He had envisioned Toyota as a force of progress, bringing mobility to the Japanese people. Instead, his company was building trucks for war. Yet he complied. There was no alternative. Refusal would have meant the end of Toyota. Surviving bombs and scarcity. As the war dragged on, Toyota faced not just resource shortages, but existential threats. In 1945, near the end of the conflict, the U.S. Air Force launched bombing raids over Japan. Industrial centers were prime targets, and Toyota's Corolla factory was on the list. Incredibly, fate spared the company. As bombers prepared to attack, Japan surrendered, ending the war before the plant could be destroyed. Had the surrender come even a few days later, Toyota might have been reduced to rubble. This narrow escape became a defining moment in the company's survival. But the war's end brought little relief. Japan lay in ruins. Cities were destroyed, infrastructure crippled, and the economy devastated. Millions were unemployed, resources were scarce, and demand for cars was virtually non-existent. Toyota, like much of Japan, was left struggling for survival. Post-war collapse. In the immediate post-war years, Toyota tried to return to its dream of passenger cars. In 1947, the company introduced the Toyota SA, a small, modest sedan designed for Japan's recovering economy. It was compact, fuel-efficient, and affordable, exactly what the nation needed. But the timing was cruel. Inflation was rampant, consumer purchasing power was minimal, and the Japanese public was more concerned with food and shelter than cars. Sales were dismal. At the same time, Toyota's finances were spiraling out of control. During the war, the company had expanded operations to meet military demand, but now those contracts were gone. Debt piled up. The workforce grew restless as layoffs loomed and wages went unpaid. By 1949, Toyota was on the brink of bankruptcy. It was a cruel irony. The company had survived bombs and war, only to face collapse in peacetime. Labor unrest. The crisis reached a breaking point in 1950 when tensions between management and labor exploded. Toyota's workers, frustrated by wage cuts and job insecurity, went on strike. The factory fell silent. For weeks, Toyota stood still, its future uncertain. The strike divided the company, pitting workers against managers, loyalty against survival. It was the darkest moment in Toyota's history, one that nearly ended the dream Kiichiro Toyoda had fought to build. The resolution came at a heavy cost. Toyota was forced to restructure, laying off more than 1,600 workers and slashing salaries across the board. Morale plummeted, and the weight of failure fell squarely on Kiichiro's shoulders. Kiichiro's resignation. For Kiichiro Toyoda, the strain was unbearable. He had dedicated his life to building Toyota into a legitimate automaker, sacrificing everything for the dream of mobility. But now, faced with strikes, layoffs, and financial ruin, he took responsibility in the only way he knew, by stepping down. In June 1950, Kiichiro resigned as president of Toyota Motor Company. His departure marked the end of an era. The son of a loom maker, the man who had dared to dream of cars in a land of bicycles, was leaving the company he had built from nothing. It was a tragic moment, but also a turning point. Leadership passed to Taizo Ishida, a pragmatic executive who brought a fresh perspective. Ishida stabilized the company by securing financial backing from the Bank of Japan and shifting Toyota AS focus toward efficiency and export opportunities. Kiichiro's final years. Kiichiro Toyoda did not live to see the full fruits of his labor. Just 2 years after his resignation in 1952, he passed away from illness at the age of 57. His death was quiet, almost unnoticed outside the circles of Toyota. But within the company, his vision lingered. He had planted the seed, endured the storms, and built the foundation. Others would carry the torch forward, but it was Kiichiro who had set Toyota on its path. A phoenix from the ashes. The early 1950s were a rebirth for Toyota. With new leadership, the company began experimenting with export markets, sending vehicles to Southeast Asia and even the United States. The Korean War provided an unexpected lifeline. Toyota supplied trucks to U.S. forces, injecting much-needed revenue into the company. Slowly, painfully, Toyota began to recover. The labor strikes faded, the debts were stabilized, and production resumed. Though the scars of war and collapse remained, Toyota was learning resilience, a trait that would come to define its corporate identity. Legacy of struggle. Looking back, it is astonishing how close Toyota came to disappearing in those years. War, shortages, bombings, bankruptcy, and strikes. Each challenge was enough to destroy a lesser company. But through determination, sacrifice, and a measure of luck, Toyota survived. These struggles forged the company's character. Efficiency was no longer just a philosophy, it was a necessity. Innovation was not about luxury, but survival, and resilience became the bedrock upon which Toyota would build its future success. The loom maker's son had not lived to see it, but his dream was alive. And in the coming decades, Toyota would rise not just as a Japanese automaker, but as a global powerhouse. But first, it needed a breakthrough, a car that would not just sustain the company, but define it. That moment was coming soon. By the early 1950s, Toyota had endured nearly every imaginable hardship: war, shortages, strikes, near bankruptcy, and the heartbreaking resignation of its founder, Kiichiro Toyoda. Yet against all odds, the company had survived. Now it needed not just survival, it needed a breakthrough. For years, Toyota's trucks had sustained the company, especially through the Korean War, when U.S. forces placed large orders for rugged transport vehicles. Those contracts provided crucial lifeblood. But Kiichiro's vision had always been passenger cars, and if Toyota was ever to stand on equal footing with the world's great automakers, it needed a car that could succeed both at home and abroad. That car would arrive in 1955, the Toyota Crown, the first true mass-market sedan. The Crown was not Toyota's first passenger car, but it was its most ambitious to date. Unlike earlier models, which had borrowed heavily from American designs, the Crown was developed entirely in-house. This was Japan's first truly domestically engineered passenger car, built from the ground up for Japanese roads and Japanese consumers. It was a bold, almost audacious step. Post-war Japan was still rebuilding, its roads narrow, rough, and often unpaved. Imported American cars were too large, too expensive, and too impractical for the average Japanese family. Toyota aimed to fill the gap with something smaller, sturdier, and more affordable, a car for Japan by Japan. The Toyota Crown RS series debuted with a 1.5-liter engine producing around 48 horsepower, modest by Western standards but perfectly suited for Japan's needs. Its design was boxy yet elegant, with enough interior space for families but compact enough to navigate tight city streets. For Toyota, the Crown was more than a car. It was a statement of intent. Toyota was no longer just assembling vehicles. It was designing them. The Crown as a symbol of national pride. The Crown's launch was a milestone for Japan itself. Less than a decade after the devastation of World War II, here was a Japanese company producing a completely homegrown sedan, proof that Japan could compete in the modern automotive industry. The Japanese press celebrated the Crown as a national achievement, and customers responded with enthusiasm. For the first time, Toyota had a genuine passenger car success. Sales grew steadily throughout the late 1950s, and the Crown became a symbol of Japan's rising economic confidence. The first leap abroad. But Toyota wasn't satisfied with success at home. The company's leadership knew that true growth meant tackling the biggest, toughest market of all, the United States. In 1957, Toyota made history by shipping the Crown to America. It was a daring move. At the time, the U.S. auto industry was the most powerful in the world, dominated by giants like Ford, GM, and Chrysler. Japanese cars were virtually unknown, and few believed they could compete in such a mature, competitive market. Toyota established its first American sales headquarters in Hollywood, California, and the Crown became the first Japanese car ever officially sold in the U.S. But the reception was difficult. Struggles in America. The Toyota Crown, so well suited for Japan's narrow streets and modest speeds, struggled badly on American highways. Its 48-horsepower engine strained to keep up with American traffic. Long-distance drives at 60 or 70 mph were exhausting for both car and driver. U.S. consumers, accustomed to large, powerful V8 sedans, saw the Crown as underpowered and fragile. Sales were disappointing. American magazines criticized its lack of performance, and Toyota quickly realized the Crown wasn't ready for America's demands. It was a setback, but also a crucial lesson. Toyota learned that success abroad would require more than simply exporting Japanese cars overseas. It would need to design vehicles tailored specifically to foreign markets, especially the U.S. The Crown may have stumbled in America, but it opened the door. It was the first Japanese car to plant a flag on American soil, and it gave Toyota invaluable insight into what global expansion would require. Growth at home. Back in Japan, however, the Crown flourished. It became the go-to car for government officials, business leaders, and middle-class families alike. Its durability and reliability earned it a loyal following. Taxi fleets adopted the Crown, and Toyota's reputation grew steadily. The success of the Crown provided Toyota with the financial stability it had long lacked. For the first time, the company could plan for growth instead of scrambling for survival. New factories were built, production capacity increased, and Toyota began investing heavily in research and development. Setting the stage for the Corolla, the Crown may not have been Toyota's global breakthrough, but it was the stepping stone. It proved Toyota could design, produce, and sell passenger cars at scale. It gave the company credibility at home and visibility abroad. Most importantly, it laid the foundation for the car that would truly transform Toyota's destiny, the Toyota Corolla, launched in 1966. Where the Crown had established Toyota's identity, the Corolla would make Toyota a household name worldwide. Affordable, reliable, and perfectly timed for the global boom in compact cars, the Corolla would go on to become the best-selling car in history. But none of that would have been possible without the Crown. The Crown's cultural legacy. Even today, the Toyota Crown holds a special place in Japanese automotive culture. It remained in continuous production for decades, evolving through more than a dozen generations. In Japan, it became synonymous with prestige and quality, the choice of government officials, executives, and taxi companies alike. In fact, the Crown became so iconic that Toyota revived its name in recent years, transforming it into a global flagship model once again. It is not just a car, it is a legacy, the first bold step that carried Toyota out of its struggles and into a future of innovation. A breakthrough against all odds. When Toyota introduced the Crown in 1955, the company was still scarred by years of hardship. Few would have believed that a company once on the verge of bankruptcy could produce a car that would reshape Japan's automotive industry. And yet the Crown was proof that resilience pays off. From the ashes of war and the brink of collapse, Toyota had created a car that symbolized Japan's rebirth. It was the breakthrough Kiichiro Toyoda had dreamed of, even if he did not live to see it. The loom maker's son had wanted mobility for the masses. The Crown was the first true realization of that dream, and the beginning of Toyota's rise to global dominance. But the story did not end there. The Crown was only the beginning. Soon, Toyota would launch a model that would conquer not just Japan, but the world. That car was the Corolla, and it was about to change everything. The year was 1966, and Japan was no longer the devastated nation of the post-war years. It was a country on the rise, its economy booming, its cities growing, and its people hungry for modern conveniences. Amid this transformation, Toyota unveiled a car that would not only define its future, but also reshape the global automotive industry. That car was the Toyota Corolla. The birth of a legend. When the Corolla was introduced, it seemed modest. A compact sedan with a 1.1-liter engine, producing about 60 horsepower, it was neither flashy nor powerful. But beneath its humble appearance lay the qualities that would make it legendary: affordability, reliability, and accessibility. Toyota's engineers had studied the needs of the average Japanese family. Roads were still narrow, fuel was costly, and consumers wanted a car that was inexpensive to buy, cheap to run, and easy to maintain. The Corolla ticked every box. Priced within reach of Japan's growing middle class, the Corolla quickly became the people's car. Within just 3 years, Toyota was selling more than 1 million Corollas worldwide. This wasn't just a new model, it was a revolution. Toyota goes global. The Corolla was the car that allowed Toyota to finally crack the international market. Unlike the Crown, which had struggled in the US, the Corolla was perfectly timed. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, American consumers were beginning to embrace smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. The U.S. auto industry, still focused on big V8-powered sedans, left a gap that Toyota was ready to fill. In 1968, the Corolla officially launched in the United States. Its compact size, impressive fuel economy, and reputation for dependability won over skeptical buyers. Suddenly, Toyota was no longer a niche Japanese brand. It was a legitimate competitor in the world's largest car market. From Europe to Southeast Asia, the Corolla followed. By the 1970s, Toyota had established assembly plants in multiple countries, making it a truly international automaker. The Corolla was not just a car, it was Toyota's passport to the world. The oil crisis. Opportunity from chaos. The global oil crisis of 1973 brought gasoline prices to record highs and left American consumers scrambling for more fuel-efficient cars. Detroit's big gas-guzzling sedans looked increasingly impractical, while the Corolla's efficiency made it the perfect alternative. Toyota's timing was impeccable. As American drivers lined up at gas stations, the Corolla became the sensible choice. Its fuel economy, low maintenance costs, and bulletproof reliability won the trust of millions. By the end of the decade, Toyota had firmly established itself in the U.S. market, and the Corolla was on its way to becoming the best-selling car of all time. Innovation. Through efficiency. Toyota's success wasn't just about good timing or luck. Behind the scenes, the company was pioneering a production philosophy that would change manufacturing forever. The Toyota Production System, TPS. Built on principles of efficiency, waste reduction, and continuous improvement, Kaizen, TPS transformed the way Toyota built cars. Workers were empowered to stop the assembly line if they spotted defects, ensuring quality control at every stage. Parts were delivered just in time, reducing costly inventory. This system produced cars of consistently high quality at lower costs, a combination that competitors struggled to match. By the 1970s, Toyota quality had become a phrase recognized around the world. Expansion in the U.S. Toyota's presence in America grew rapidly. By the late 1970s, the company was exporting hundreds of thousands of cars annually. Dealership networks expanded, and Toyota began tailoring vehicles to American tastes. In 1984, Toyota partnered with General Motors to create the NUMMI plant in California, its first U.S. manufacturing facility. This was a symbolic victory. Toyota was no longer just exporting cars to America, it was building them on American soil. This strategy not only eased trade tensions, but also deepened Toyota's relationship with U.S. consumers. For many, Toyota was no longer a foreign brand. It was a part of the American automotive landscape. Beyond the Corolla, a growing lineup. While the Corolla remained Toyota's backbone, the company expanded its lineup to serve diverse markets. The Celica, launched in 1970, introduced sportier styling for younger buyers. The rugged Land Cruiser, already popular in developing markets, became a global icon for off-road durability. And in 1982, Toyota introduced a car that would eventually become a legend in its own right, the Camry. Larger and more refined than the Corolla, the Camry was aimed squarely at middle-class families in developed markets. It quickly became one of America's favorite sedans, cementing Toyota's reputation for reliability and value. Together, these models, Corolla, Camry, Land Cruiser, and others, gave Toyota a full portfolio, allowing it to compete across nearly every segment. Building a reputation. By the 1980s, Toyota's reputation for reliability was unmatched. Stories spread of Corollas running for hundreds of thousands of miles with little more than routine maintenance. Taxi drivers in Asia swore by Toyota sedans that could endure years of punishing service. Farmers in Africa trusted Land Cruisers to conquer terrain that broke lesser vehicles. This reputation was not marketing hype, it was earned. Toyota cars were engineered with durability and simplicity in mind. In markets where roads were poor and mechanics scarce, that reliability made the difference between mobility and breakdown. As one American advertisement put it, "You asked for it, you got it." Toyota. The numbers don't lie. By the late 1980s, the Corolla had become the best-selling nameplate in the world, surpassing Volkswagen's Beetle. Toyota's global production soared into the millions annually. What had started as Kiichiro Toyoda's fragile dream had now become a global reality. Toyota was no longer an underdog. It was a giant, respected, trusted, and unstoppable. Preparing for the future Toyota's rise in the 1970s and 1980s wasn't just about chasing sales. The company was also looking ahead. It invested heavily in research, exploring new technologies, and preparing for stricter fuel economy and emissions regulations. This forward thinking would lead, in the 1990s, to the development of the Toyota Prius, the world's first mass-produced hybrid. But even before that innovation, Toyota had already secured its place as a leader in efficiency, quality, and global reach. From struggle to recognition, it is hard to imagine that just 2 decades earlier, Toyota had been on the verge of collapse, crippled by debt and labor strikes. Now, the company stood tall, a symbol of Japan's economic miracle and a respected player on the global stage. The Corolla was more than a car. It was a phenomenon. It represented freedom, opportunity, and mobility for millions of people worldwide. Toyota had achieved global recognition, but it was not done yet. Ahead lay not only more growth, but the creation of cars that would push the boundaries of performance and culture. One of them would become one of the most legendary sports cars of all time, the Toyota Supra. By the 1970s and 1980s, Toyota had built a global reputation for efficiency, reliability, and quality. Cars like the Corolla and Camry were trusted family companions, workhorses that never seemed to quit. But Toyota's engineers weren't satisfied with just being practical. Beneath the surface, a new ambition was growing: to create a car that wasn't just dependable but thrilling. Out of that ambition emerged a machine that would go on to become a cultural icon, a car that bridged the gap between sensible Toyota engineering and high-octane performance. That car was the Toyota Supra. The Celica roots. The Supra's story began in 1978, not as a standalone model, but as an offshoot of the Toyota Celica. Toyota wanted a sportier, more powerful version of the Celica to compete with cars like the Nissan Z series. The result was the Celica Supra, or Celica XX in Japan. Longer, Wider, and equipped with an inline-six engine instead of the Celica's four-cylinder, the Celica Supra hinted at the potential of something greater. It was comfortable, stylish, and surprisingly refined, blending Toyota's reputation for quality with the excitement of a sports car. But the Supra was just getting started. The 1980s, finding its identity. In 1982, Toyota introduced the Mark II Supra A60. Now, the Supra began to step out of the Celica's shadow. With a sharper wedge-shaped design and up to 178 horsepower, the Supra was Toyota's answer to the growing appetite for Japanese performance cars. It wasn't just about speed. The Supra offered luxury touches like digital dashboards, leather interiors, and advanced electronics. Toyota wanted to show the world that Japanese cars could be both fun and sophisticated. By the mid-1980s, the Supra was carving out a reputation of its own. And in 1986, Toyota made a decisive move. It split the Supra from the Celica, creating a fully independent model line. The Mark III Supra A70 was born. The Mark III Supra, turbocharged ambition. The Mark III was Toyota's first true performance-oriented Supra. Launched with rear-wheel drive and a 3.0-liter inline-six, it pushed out up to 232 horsepower in turbocharged form. For the first time, Toyota was directly challenging European performance cars like the Porsche 944 and BMW 3 Series. The Supra wasn't just a Japanese sports car anymore. It was a contender on the world stage. The Mark III also introduced advanced technology for its time, including electronically adjustable suspension and ABS brakes. It showed that Toyota was serious about combining innovation with performance. But the best was yet to come. The legend arrives, the Mark IV Supra. In 1993, Toyota unveiled the Mark IV Supra A80, a car that would become legendary. Low, wide, and muscular, the Mark IV was a masterpiece of 1990s design. Its rounded, aerodynamic shape set it apart from boxier competitors, while under the hood lurked an engine that would become a legend, the 2JZ-GTE. This 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged inline-six produced 276 horsepower in Japan and 320 horsepower in the U.S., but in reality, the 2JZ was famously overbuilt, capable of handling 700, 800, even 1,000 horsepower with aftermarket modifications. Car enthusiasts quickly discovered that the Supra was not just a fast car, it was a blank canvas for tuners. With the right upgrades, the Supra could embarrass supercars costing 10 times as much. The Mark IV Supra became Toyota's halo car, a symbol of engineering excellence and unshakable reliability in a world of temperamental sports cars. Racing pedigree. The Supra wasn't just a tuner's dream. It also proved itself on the track. Toyota entered the Supra in endurance races like the 24 Hours of Le Mans and Japan SJGTC All-Japan Grand Touring Car Championship. The car's balance, durability, and power made it a formidable competitor, and its victories on the track only fueled its reputation on the streets. The pop culture explosion. While car enthusiasts loved the Supra, its cultural explosion came from an unexpected source: Hollywood. In 2001, the bright orange Mark IV Supra starred in the first Fast and Furious movie. Driven by Paul Walker's character, Brian O'Connor, the Supra cemented itself as a global icon. Millions of people who had never cared about cars suddenly knew the name Supra. Video games like Gran Turismo and Need for Speed amplified its fame, making the Supra the dream car of an entire generation. For young enthusiasts, the Supra wasn't just a Toyota. It was the car. The end of an era yet, just as the Supra reached peak stardom, Toyota made a painful decision. By the late 1990s, tightening emissions regulations, rising insurance costs, and slowing sports car sales spelled trouble for high-performance models. In 1998, Toyota pulled the Supra from the U.S. market. By 2002, production ended in Japan. the Supra was gone, but not forgotten. Its legend only grew in its absence. Prices for used Supras began to climb, and clean examples became collector's items. The 2JZ engine's tuning potential achieved mythical status, making the car a staple of car shows, drag strips, and street culture. The return of a legend. For nearly 2 decades, fans begged Toyota to bring the Supra back. And in 2019, their prayers were answered. Toyota unveiled the Mark V Supra, A90, co-developed with BMW and powered by a turbocharged inline-6. The new Supra sparked debate. Purists lamented its partnership with BMW, arguing it lacked the soul of the original. But others embraced it as a worthy successor, praising its performance, handling, and modern technology. Whether loved or criticized, the return of the Supra proved one thing. Its name carried a weight few other cars could match. The Supra wasn't just a vehicle, it was a cultural phenomenon. The Supra's cultural impact. Few cars have achieved the Supra's level of legendary status. It represents more than horsepower or speed. It represents possibility. For young enthusiasts, the Supra was the car that showed that a humble Japanese brand, once known only for reliability, could create something that rivaled the world's best sports cars. It embodied the spirit of the 1990s tuning culture, the rise of Japanese performance cars, and the globalization of car enthusiasm. From Tokyo to Los Angeles, from drag strips to movie screens, the Supra became universal shorthand for car passion. A company transformed. The Supra's legacy is about more than just one model. It showed that Toyota could innovate beyond efficiency and reliability. It proved that passion and performance could coexist with practicality. Today, Toyota is known not only for cars like the Corolla and Camry, but also for high-performance legends like the Supra, the MR2, and the rally-bred Celica GT4. These cars expanded Toyota's identity from sensible to sensational. The Supra, in particular, became the car that defined an era and ensured Toyota would never be seen as just another conservative automaker. From humble beginnings to global legend from the loom maker's son, Kiichiro Toyoda, to the factories of Koromo, to the struggles of war and near collapse, Toyota had endured it all. And out of that resilience came not only the world's most practical cars, but also one of the most legendary sports cars of all time. The Supra stands as a testament to Toyota's journey, from humble beginnings to a cultural powerhouse. But the story doesn't end here. The Supra is just one chapter in Toyota's incredible legacy, a company that continues to innovate, inspire, and push the boundaries of what cars can be. Next, we'll reflect on the founder's legacy, the company's global impact, and how Toyota became more than just a car brand. It became a symbol of resilience, innovation, and dreams realized. When we look back at the history of Toyota, it's easy to be dazzled by the sheer scale of its success. More than 10 million vehicles sold every year, production plants on nearly every continent, and cars that have become part of daily life for millions of families worldwide. Toyota today is not just a company, it is a pillar of the global automotive industry. But behind the numbers and statistics lies a story of struggle, vision, and determination. The story of one man who dared to dream that Japan could stand alongside the giants of the automobile world. Kiichiro Toyoda's vision. Kiichiro Toyoda did not inherit an empire. He inherited his father's workshop. Sakichi Toyoda gave the world innovative looms, but it was Kiichiro who took the unimaginable leap into a completely new industry. In 1933, when he first proposed building cars, critics scoffed. Japan had no infrastructure, no suppliers, no tradition of automobile manufacturing. But Kiichiro believed that Japan could not modernize without mastering the automobile. It was a vision rooted not in ego, but in national pride and determination. He studied, he experimented, and he sacrificed. And when Toyota finally produced its first car, the modest Model AA, it wasn't just a vehicle, It was proof that Japan could build its own future. Survival through struggle. Toyota's early years were marked by turbulence. The war nearly destroyed the company. The post-war collapse of Japan's economy left Toyota on the brink of bankruptcy. Worker strikes, scarce resources, and political uncertainty threatened to erase Kiichiro's dream. And yet, each crisis forged Toyota into something stronger. Out of desperation came the Toyota production system, a method of efficiency and quality that would later transform global manufacturing. Out of setbacks came resilience. Every obstacle became an opportunity to innovate. When other automakers faltered under pressure, Toyota endured. The Corolla, a car for the world. If one car embodies Toyota's mission to serve the masses, it is the Toyota Corolla. Introduced in 1966, the Corolla wasn't flashy. It wasn't exotic, but it was exactly what the world needed. Small, reliable, affordable, and adaptable. In America, the Corolla arrived at the perfect time as consumers were looking for fuel efficiency and value. Within a few decades, it became the best-selling car in history. More than 50 million Corollas have been sold worldwide, more than any other single nameplate. The Corolla proved that Toyota wasn't just building cars, it was building trust. It wasn't just competing, it was redefining what the average person expected from a vehicle. The Supra, a dream machine. On the other side of the spectrum lies the Toyota Supra, a car that fulfilled a different part of the dream. Where the Corolla represented practicality, the Supra embodied passion. With the legendary 2JZ engine, the Supra showed the world that Toyota could create a car that wasn't just dependable, but exhilarating. It didn't just win races, it won hearts. It didn't just set lap times, it inspired a generation. From the Fast and the Furious to Gran Turismo, the Supra became a symbol of freedom, speed, and individuality. This dual legacy, the Corolla for the people and the Supra for the dreamers, reflects the soul of Toyota, a company that could be both sensible and sensational, grounded yet daring. Global impact. The history of Toyota is also the history of globalization. In the 1950s, Toyota was a small Japanese automaker. By the 1980s, it was challenging the American Big Three. By the 2000s, it had become the largest car manufacturer in the world. Toyota didn't just export cars, it built factories across the globe, creating jobs in the United States, Europe, and beyond. In places like Kentucky, Texas, and Mississippi, Toyota became part of the local community, blending Japanese efficiency with American craftsmanship. At the same time, Toyota revolutionized manufacturing worldwide. The Toyota production system, with its principles of just-in-time and Kaizen, continuous improvement, became the gold standard, studied and imitated across industries from electronics to healthcare. Legacy of innovation. Toyota's impact isn't confined to the past. The company continues to shape the future. In 1997, it shocked the world by introducing the Prius, the first mass-produced hybrid car. Critics laughed at first, but the Prius became a symbol of environmental consciousness and paved the way for the hybrid revolution. Today, Toyota invests billions in hydrogen fuel cells, electrification, and autonomous driving technologies. While rivals chase trends, Toyota balances bold innovation with the same principle that Kiichiro held close. Every car must serve the people. Kiichiro's enduring spirit. Kiichiro Toyoda did not live to see Toyota's global dominance. He passed away in 1952, worn down by the struggles of his early leadership. But his spirit endures in every Corolla that starts on a cold morning, in every Supra that roars down a racetrack, and in every factory where Toyota's methods shaped the future of industry. His dream was simple, that Japan could stand on equal footing with the world's great automakers. Today, Toyota doesn't just stand among them, it leads them. Cinematic closing. From the quiet click of a loom to the thunder of a turbocharged engine, from the dusty back roads of post-war Japan to the sprawling highways of America, Toyota's story is a story of transformation. It is the journey of a company that rose from obscurity, faced near-certain defeat, and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. The Corolla taught us that greatness can be humble. The Supra taught us that greatness can be bold. And Toyota itself teaches us that greatness comes not from avoiding struggle, but from embracing it. This is not just the history of a car company. It is the history of a vision fulfilled, a dream realized, and a legacy that will continue to drive humanity forward. Because at the heart of every Toyota, from the simplest sedan to the wildest sports car, beats the same rhythm that began over a century ago in the mind of Kiichiro Toyoda. The belief that machines can change lives and that dreams, no matter how impossible, are worth pursuing. This is the legacy of Toyota.